Hello, I'm Darren again. Today's question asks if I would discuss spiritual abuse. Now, when I say the word spiritual, you may think of religion and faith, and well, yes, some people can be abused by toxic, nasty people who are involved in religious organizations or pseudo religious movements. But there is much more to spiritual abuse than you might think. It doesn't necessarily have to take place in a religious setting or by a religious person. People can be spiritually abused in relationships, in romantic relationships. It can happen in families, workplaces, communities. It can happen in political and ideological movements. It can happen in cults. It may involve insulting, humiliating, punishing someone for their faith, their culture, their values, or even their political beliefs. It could involve just preventing someone from being able to practice those beliefs. But it can be more insidious than that. The aim of spiritual abuse is to break someone's spirit, and it's often done from a position of righteousness and morality. As C.S. Lewis once wrote, "A tyranny exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive, for those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their conscience." And those who abuse others spiritually often claim it is for the victim's own good, or it's for the greater good, it's for the good of the family, the group, the organization, or for society. And they may attack someone outright, or they may plant little tiny seeds of doubt, or they may use someone's beliefs and values against them to coerce them. So today I'll give a brief outline of what spiritual abuse is and give some common signs and examples of it. I'll also look at the impact it can have on someone. So, if you like this video, if you find it interesting or helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel. Just to remind you though, this video is for information purposes only. So like all forms of abuse, spiritual abuse is an aspect of coercive control. Coercive is a pattern of behavior that can be manipulative, degrading, and threatening. It is a behavior that is aimed at disempowering others, to restrict their freedoms, their choices, and to control them. To control them by targeting the victim's values, their character, religion, their culture, their sense of morality, and even their beliefs. Now, not by debating with them or challenging them, but by manipulating, by attacking them. It is attacking the person's very core. If they break that down, they break the person down. And it can involve twisting things out of context, things like tradition, religious texts, laws, rules, morality and virtue, even justice. Things that could be very difficult for the victim to argue against without sounding like they're a villain of some kind or they're a heretic or a sinner. So, some of the common signs of spiritual abuse would be, first of all, the victim has to obey the abuser. The abuser is superior, and that superiority is theirs by right. They are morally superior, so any questions, any deviation in the rules might be considered to be wickedness or problematic. They are closer to God, so the victim's place in heaven is dependent on them. They are intellectually superior, so any argument, any questions are considered to be disrespectful or ridiculous. The abuser demands a blind allegiance. Now, where there is a blind allegiance, I often think it's a sign of a hidden agenda. Now, that hidden agenda could be something quite sinister, or it could be just they want to fuel their ego. Secondly, there are double standards. The abuser may place a lot of burdens upon their victims. They have to behave a certain way. They have to use a particular language, only associate with people that they approve of. They maybe have to identify themselves a certain way or dress a certain way. In the meantime, the abuser just does whatever they like. They may disapprove of luxuries and yet live a lavish lifestyle, encourage charity and giving, but are quite greedy and selfish. They lay down a lot of rules, rules that they don't even follow themselves. As the old expression goes, they do not practice what they preach. They may claim to be the head of the household, the chairperson of whatever. They are virtuous and noble. They are God's anointed ones. So they will always behave as if they are beyond reproach and never in error. and yet be very quick to point out everybody else's failures, everybody else's errors, everybody else's lack of virtue and sin. They may preach love and kindness, but demonstrate hatred and behave sadistically. They may preach inclusion and yet exclude others. Demand respect, but do nothing to earn it and certainly do not reciprocate it. Now, on the outside, some people might be thinking this is maybe mixed morals. I would suggest it's more a morality without the morals. Thirdly, the abuser cultivates a dependence on them. Now, the victim must come to them for information, for guidance, for permission even. Victims are often isolated or discouraged from talking to others who may show them or tell them something different. In some cases, certain ideas are forbidden, as are certain books, movies, TV shows. The abuser filters reality for their victims, interprets what things mean for the victims. It's really just a form of gaslighting. Next, there is a relationship or a culture that is based on shame and fear. Often exclusive language is used, things like, we are the ones living the right way, we are the ones who are on the right side, everybody else is wrong, they are misguided, they are stupid, or they are evil. And anyone who raises a legitimate concern or disagrees or questions something, the abuser often sees now as the enemy. Friends, loved ones, allies quickly become enemies once any questions are raised, and they are threatened, bullied, and shamed into silence. In fact, non-compliance would sometimes come with accusations like sinner, heretic, narcissist, fascist, and sometimes a lot worse. And some of these accusations can carry a lot of weight. These labels come with consequences. So even when they're used falsely, they can still generate fear. There's the fear of reprisal, the fear of rejection, the fear of being cancelled. And that could mean maybe a loss of resources, like a loss of income, a loss of a job. But it can also mean being ostracized by friends, family, the community, work colleagues, ostracized by pretty much everyone. And generating this kind of fear allows the abuser to hold their victims to account for what they say and what they think. Because if the abuser doesn't like what their victim says or thinks, it could be labeled as blasphemous or hate speech. And where you might find a group or a family, the abuser may also insist that others now treat the victim as the enemy, or they will also be targeted. Lastly, victims are forced to comply with things that they feel uncomfortable with. Now, this could be maybe attending religious gatherings or political gatherings or going to protests. It could be having to show public support at work or on social media for whatever the cause happens to be. It could be having to give time, money, resources that they don't have. It could be having to give themselves. Now, this is why I often think of narcissistic families and extremist movements as being like a cult. Because trying to break away from someone or something that is spiritually abusive can be like trying to leave a cult. And the thing about a cult is, you're not allowed to leave. Leaving is made very difficult. There may be seeds of doubt planted. There could be manipulation that might appeal to someone's conscience. If they can't gently persuade them, they may try to blackmail them or emotionally blackmail them. If that doesn't work, they may threaten them. And if that doesn't work, they might just come after them. And sometimes I wonder if it is just because some abusive people are just vindictive and sadistic by nature, or is it because they're like all cult leaders and spiritual abusers? It's because they fear that once that person is free, they may tell the truth. But either way, do you ever notice abusive people, they do their damnedest to discredit their victims so that no one will believe them. As the philosopher Karl Popper once said, those who promise paradise on earth never produced anything but a hell. Now, like all forms of abuse, being spiritually abused can leave its scars. It can cause depression, anxiety, complex trauma. It can affect someone's self-confidence, their self-esteem. It can further isolate victims, especially if others believe the lies and also punish them. It can push people away from their faith, from their religion, from their politics, because they now associate that with their abuser. Now, if you have been in or are in a relationship or an environment or a situation where you're being spiritually abused, I would invite you to consider reaching out to someone for support. Get the help and support you need, and counseling, psychotherapy can be a good place to start. Recovery can be a little easier when you don't have to do it alone. So that's a brief outline of spiritual abuse. Now, there are many other things I could have added. Please feel free to use the comment box below. There are some interesting conversations started around these videos. And until next time, thanks for watching.